is Jill and I'm your host. And there we go, recording is in progress. So fantastic. We're just going to, I was going to say, we're just going to start to set the record button for those people who weren't able to join. But I'm so glad you have joined, because this is going to be a really great interactive session. Welcome to Building Your Brand, Turn Your Profile into Your Asset, with our fantastic speaker, Linzi Boyd of Bob. Bob stands for Business of Brand. And this event obviously is in conjunction with NatWest, Royal Bank and Ulster Bank. I want to just quickly, before we start our event, I just wanted to quickly highlight that this is in fact the second of 3 events today. So there is another event at 2:30, which is about, it's called Inside Stories. And it's all about how you create an authentic, personal and unforgettable narrative for your story, for your business, sorry. We all share and learn through stories. I'm a huge believer in that. And we'll share the link for that. And it's at 2:30 today at the end of this session. So joining me today are colleagues from the bank's enterprise team, and we're all here to make this go smoothly as possible, along with members of the Bob team as well. So thank you for joining. I'm Jill Rattray, and I'll be one of the voices you hear, and also my colleague Kristen Boland, and we'll be doing the Q&A section at the end of the talk. Which leads me on to some housekeeping, which is just that we ask that you put questions through the Q&A panel. Obviously, the chat is fantastic and lively, but it's a little bit tricky for us to pick out the questions. So do use the Q&A function. And also, you have the option to raise a hand, and we'll unmute you, and you can have the floor to ask your question as well. And we'd be hugely grateful. Linzi was just telling me she's already been social media, out there doing stuff on social media. So feel free to, and she'll tell you all about this during the talk, I'm sure. But what we've seen is after events, we get some fantastic shares on LinkedIn of key takeaways, and they tag us in at NatWest Business. And it's just so nice to see that people have got so much from the event. So please feel free to do that. We really appreciate it. And I think that takes us on to just very briefly, this is the other support that the bank has for businesses. You'll see lots of different titles there. The one I just want to really highlight today is Business Builder. Business Builder is this fantastic resources for businesses. No matter what stage you're at, you can absolutely learn something from these. It's completely free, and you don't have to be a bank customer, and you can go at your pace to learn exactly what you want for your business. It's a fantastic resource. So if you haven't signed up already, do go on after this session and check it out. So we're with that housekeeping out of the way. Let's move on to today's event, Building a Brand, Turn Your Profile into an Asset. In this ever-changing environment, I think we can all agree it's certainly ever-changing. We crave and value personal connection more than ever. Developing the potential of your personal brand has never been more important. And that's why we are delighted to have our speaker today, Linzi Boyd from Bob. Just to give you a little bit of background on Linzi. Linzi is she's a visionary leader. Linzi Boyd is the woman known for building famous brands and speaking on a world stage about global trends. She's also a best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, and founder of Bob. By 24, Linzi had set up and sold 2 businesses. That's 24, folks. Her second company was sold to Caterpillar, and her third business, Surgery, championed some of the most well-respected brands known today. Linzi now works in the enterprise market, teaching entrepreneurs how to build famous brands for bigger valuation and scale to impact the world. She launched the first purpose-led platform, Bob Earth, in 2020, which connects people to unite, learn to grow, and trade with positive impact in the world. I had the opportunity to do 2 days of training with Bob School back about 2 years ago in London, when we used to do that kind of thing. Linzi is such a compelling speaker. Frankly, if she'd been starting a cult, I'd have joined by the end of the 2 days. It was just incredibly compelling, and I was absolutely sold. So I'm just about to hand over. We can stop sharing our screens, and Linzi team will start sharing theirs. Just to say, apparently Linzi was told by teachers she should stop speaking. She'd do better if she stopped talking. but we don't want her to stop talking today. So I'm just going to hand over to Linzi. So pleased to have her. So hand over to you, Linzi.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a fantastic entrance. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Jill and to NatWest, because we've had a wonderful relationship with NatWest. And I have to say, when I was 21 years of age, the only person that would give me the government grant at the time to get my shoes built and into the shops was NatWest Bank. And I've banked with NatWest from the age of 20 to the age of 47. So I would say that not only have I had a personal relationship with the bank and still bank with NatWest, but we've had a business relationship. And as you heard Jill say, we've had this beautiful synergy where they've been in the business school and we've learned together about what does it mean to combine financial growth and business growth and how important that is in a market for today. So on to the topic that Jill's asked me to come and talk about, my favorite mastermind topic, which is brand. And really, how do you build a brand on purpose? And that's the topic for today. So NatWest is running this series around building your brand. And what we're talking about is how do you turn your profile into an asset? Now, for people that know me around the world, and you'll see my office is covered in it, I have to say, I am all about building brands that shift industries that make a positive change in the world. And people often say to me, what does that mean, Linzi? And I say, I'm really here to create what I would describe as the face of modern business and the face of the modern world. And it was always my belief, and this was from a young age, that people would shift industries, people would shift societies, and the shift would come from these people known as a brand and not just come from the institutions. And so on my journey I went, as you heard Jill describe, and I set up and built a couple of businesses before the age of 24. And then I then set out to build, renovate, and refresh some of the most famous brands on the high street. And what I recognized over that period of time, and look, I've only ever built businesses, and what I used to describe them as was a brand, because I came from the consumer world where everybody talked about themselves as a brand. And it was only 9 years ago when I transitioned into the world of business, the world of enterprise, any industry sector, that people were confused by the word brand. And they used to ask me, what is it you do for a living, Linzi? And I used to say, well, I build brands that shift industries. And they used to start showing me their logo and their websites. And I was quite confused. And I recognized that they were thinking about branding and they weren't thinking about the word brand. So when I talk about brand, and you might want to write this down, brand means your business model. The brand is the end to end of the whole of the business model. And it connects you in with your brand. What's the DNA of your business? What's the DNA of you? The products that sit around that, both intangible and tangible. The routes to market, the channels within which you put yourself through. And the sales process, what campaigns, what pricing, what packaging. And how do you connect that whole system together to be able to build yourself or your business brand-led rather than sales-led? And what I was very good at doing through all my businesses was spotting the asset inside of a business and be able to put that asset to the top of the business model. And what I recognized, particularly in my third business, the 17 years of building businesses, was that I built businesses and I built people businesses. And whether it was me working with a celebrity on turning them into a business, or whether I was working with a business on turning them into a brand-led growth business, for me, it always was the same thing. How do you turn the business into an asset to drive the sales, the awareness, and the value, the valuation of the business up? So when NatWest asked me to come and speak today, and this has been a popular topic over lockdown because people are now recognizing, as I'm going to come to, that your profile is an asset. It's no longer that you just look inside the business from the business perspective and look at the assets in the business. People are now recognizing that people are assets in their own right. And so how do we turn your profile into an asset? And this is the topic of the next hour. Before I move on to the next slide, what I'd like to position for you is the market. We used to look at people as people. Obviously, people have talked about culture inside organizations, and that's been a topic of conversation for many years. And what I started to go out and talk about was brand culture. How do you look at and unlearn how 20th century thinking was all about how you take your brand externally in the marketplace and you build the culture internally? What I started to recognize was that 21st century thinking was how do you bring the brand internally into the organization, and how do you understand what the assets are of the business, which are now the people, and how do you now take the people brands and the assets of those out externally in the marketplace and align the business brand and the people brands together? And what I recognized from doing that for a number of years and switching over the business model was we started to get huge retention and uplift, not only of awareness, but also of sales, and started to increase valuation of businesses, because what was happening was we were able to bring in bigger partnerships, bring in bigger channels, bring in bigger conversations to the market. So this conversation is going to look at how do you align not only you, the CEO, the C-suite, the management team, but how do you look at all of the people inside of the organization as an asset? And that would look at the people that help grow the business, which would be management team, the people that are the front end, that are there, that are looking at sales teams, marketing teams, and the people in the back office. And when you look at that, you're looking at how to turn everyone into an asset to leverage off the business, rather than just looking at a percentage that would typically sit in the C-suite or the founder of the business. And when you understand that, then you will understand the difference between turning your profile into an asset and building your profile around a social media campaign. So as you heard, my name is Linzi Boyd, and I am here to take you on this journey for the next hour. Let me say to you, I love an interactive session, and we've got, 200 people on this talk today. So I do love the chat box lighting up like a Christmas tree and people asking many questions about different things. What we will try and do is monitor the chat box, and then we'll be able to bring I'll either bring some questions in during the chat, or we're going to spend 15 to 20 minutes to half an hour at the end, and we will then be able to answer as many questions as possible. Okay, before we start, could you please make sure that you put your panelists and attendees, not just panelists, because that means that everybody will see the chat box and not just the panelists. And the second thing I'm going to kick off with is, I love to know who's on the call. So, and I know this is going to set the chat box going crazy right now, but could you all say who you are and what your purpose is, if you know what your purpose is? So could you say who you are in the chat box, introduce yourself, just one line, because there's obviously nearly 200 people, and what your purpose is, who you are, what your business is, and what your purpose is. And if you could put that in the chat box, I will start off with mine. So as you can see, I own a business called Bob Earth. And what we describe, Bob Earth is a brand new earth that connects businesses all around the world to unite, so that they can learn together to grow and trade with each other to impact. And when I was on my third business and I was building all these businesses for 17 years, I actually sat down and met my business partner, Darren Sherlaw, and I sat with him one day and I said, I'm completely fed up. I can no longer build businesses just around commercial gain anymore. I really need to go and impact change in the world. And at a young age of 13, I stood in the kitchen with my mum and I was failing at school. And I said to my mum, I'm going to leave school. And my mum said to me, Lindsay, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, don't worry, mum. I'm going to be as big as Oprah Winfrey. Now, you can imagine saying that to your mum at 13 years of age. And I'm now a mum with 2 kids. My mum looked at me like I had 2 heads. And so I turned around to her and I had this drive and this passion, and I saw something in Oprah. And there was something about Oprah, not just being a celebrity, but she was driving off purpose. And 9 years ago, I sat in this space and I looked back at this girl and I said, yes, I've learned my college course. I know how to build businesses, scale and grow a business. But now what I want to do is go out and do my real job. And my real job was to shift the world into a new era through the eyes of brands. My real job was to build brands to shift industries that were going to make a positive change in the world. And my real job was to be able to help businesses to understand how to transition over from 20th century thinking to 21st century thinking and lead with purpose, but drive it into the business model. So not just campaign it and just have it as a marketing strapline, but actually connect purpose with your business model. So when you grow and scale and you drive the sales and the awareness and the value, you're also driving the legacy, the people, and the purpose. And so my vision was to create a brand new earth, which, as you heard Jill say, we launched in 2020. And it's the first purpose-led platform that connects people and businesses all around the world to trade on purpose. And you heard Jill say she came in an offline business school with us. We were running business schools around the world. We had over 5,300 people, businesses, come into our schools, and we were teaching them how to transition a business over to be able to lead with purpose, but also build a commercial business model underneath it. And it was fondly described as Bob's School, the first real entrepreneur school, which is now on our technology platform as Bob's School Homeschooling. But the real driver of everything we were doing was to create a community that was purpose-led. What if we could connect all these purposes together to create one earth with 1 billion purposes? Could we go and shift the world that way? Could we shift education, health, manufacturing, retail, finance, all the industries together by connecting each purpose together on a common purpose to unite the world on purpose from a platform for good with one combined message? What you want to be known for. And so when I do this, and I always do this in the chat box, and I'm thankful to you all for putting all your purposes in this chat box. I'm watching them all stream down, which is absolutely fantastic. And I want to say hello to every single one of you. And what I would like to say is when we do this, the key driver, the key message that we say is, what do you want to be known for? And how do you want to show up? And so I'm going to take you back in history, and I'm going to start with a history conversation. I'm going to start with, because I come from a consumer trends background, and I used to be brought in to spot gaps and look at trends and see where societal shifts were moving to. And I used to move very big brands into these gaps. So G-Star, Superdry, Wrangler, very big brands, Topshop, Miss Selfridge, they would all come to me and they would want me to move them into future gaps. Or I would work with early stage growth businesses that didn't have any revenue, that we would turn into becoming brand famous. Or I worked with businesses that were really dying, you know, Geeves and Hawkes, Pringle of Scotland, businesses that were failing, and I'd bring them back to exceed their former glory. And whichever way we did it, we would always look at it from a trend perspective. So on this next slide, this shows where the markets come from. But before I do that, I'm going to play you this video, which is all around the emotional journey of the customer. And let's just start with there, because this starts beautifully with why we're here in the first place. Oh, I'm not sure the sound's going to work, is it?
The human connection.
Can you let me know if the sound's on and it's just me not hearing it?
That's working now. Thank you,
It is.
Linzi.
Businesses have a heart, a DNA, and at the heart of every business is its culture. The people, the clients, the emotional connection, the human connection. In the 21st century, businesses will speak directly to the people, business to people. So I ask you, what do you want to be famous for? And if you turn around and say, I don't want to be famous, then ask yourself this question. Do you want to be known in your industry for making a difference?
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
The customer wants to know who you are. What do you stand for? You are already a brand. You are already sitting on the internet. So own the space and own it for what you want to do in the world. What if we bring together the creative world and the business world to support entrepreneurs? There's a difference between a creative journey and a growth journey. And the trends of business have now moved into this growth journey space. Creativity alone won't be enough. We need to activate growth in our businesses and not just leave it in the business plan.
So I love kicking off with a short video because that enables me to talk to you about the emotional connection with the customer. And we're now in an era where people are looking at their people brands and recognizing, as you heard me say, I am a brand. And this is the trend where it's come from. So we were used to be pre-digital building our business just off a brand. You couldn't see into the lives of these people. You could just see the glossy veneer of this big brand. And at the time, the brands were looking at their mission and their vision, but it was really more about power. It was more about how do they become the biggest and the best brand in the world, and not so much about the purpose that sat underneath it. And then what happened was digital came along. And it completely and utterly changed the landscape, because for the first time in history, you could see into the lives of these people. And so the people started to become ever more present than the business brand itself. And then what happened was we moved into an era of purpose. And in the early 90s, people started asking why. Why are you creating those shoes in that sweatshop? My business at the time, I had a shoe business and we were manufacturing our shoes in Korea, and I had 7 distribution channels running around the world. And at the time, Nike brought their shoes into our factory because it went all over the papers that they were manufacturing their shoes in a sweatshop. This was in the early 90s. And so people started to ask why. And so purpose became very apparent and became a trend in the market. Now, being a trend analyst, I always used to watch when a trend was happening and when the ride of the trend was. And purpose came in, believe it or not, in the early 90s. In 2010, a man named Simon Sinek, and if somebody can put into the chat box for me, who is Simon Sinek? Just somebody put in the chat box for me. Thank you, Rachel. Very quick off the button. Start with why. And start with why meant that in 2010, Simon Sinek put purpose into the mainstream. And I thought that was fascinating because all of a sudden in 2010, everybody started talking about purpose, and I was on to the next trend. And what I recognized was the next trend was all around who. and the emotional connection with the customer are no longer the sales journey that was back in actually the late 80s, which was how do you sell to somebody at every point. From 2010, the new trend appeared, and it was all about who. And it was the emotional connection with the customer and no longer the sales journey. And that meant that you had to speak to your customer to connect with them emotionally. So understanding their emotions and getting them to connect with you. So the line that you want them to say is, oh my gosh, you know me. How do you know me so well? And at that point, your purpose is embedded into your business, that you're speaking to the people about their emotions, and you're not actually selling your why anymore. You're speaking to them about them. And for anybody that's interested in a little bit more information on that, I have a beautiful video that I could send to people, and I can send that post this session. And so if you move on to the next slide, what you'll recognize is that in the 20th century, people were building their business just around a profit. And the trend came about because we used to be in the early 20th century around craft and around production. And then all of a sudden, mass production came in, Ford's assembly lines. How do you make things fast fashion? How do we get things to stay on shelves longer? How do we transition from having a glass bottle to a plastic bottle because it's going to save us money? And how do we put chemicals into food to be able to put that onto the shelves and keep the food on shelves longer? And in the 20th century, we thought that was a good idea. And we thought that this was something that was good. And then the recognition came in the late 20th century that we realized that actually that wasn't a good idea and that we were damaging the planet. And in the 21st century, people started to think about how to put the planet first and move us into a space of back to nature with a fusion of technology. And obviously being in the pandemic and being in the recession, that trend sped up. And what happened was a consciousness arrived, a conscious awakening in the world. We started talking about what's going on in the world, and is it right to do things in the way that we were doing them before? And the power of brands and what those brands' power had in the marketplace. And could they lead with purpose beyond profit and legacy beyond fame? And when I used to go and teach before we had, before we were locked in houses and I couldn't get out into the world, I used to go and teach the younger generation as well as teaching scale up and established businesses. And when I used to teach the younger generation, I would never go in and say, what do you want to do with this business? Because they would just turn around and say to me, well, I want to put coding into schools, Lindsay, or I want to go and help third world countries. I spoke on stage with a girl who was 16 years of age, and there was 400 people in the room, in the auditorium, and I wasn't able to hear the end of her speech. But she turned around and said, well, I'm working with Donna Karan. And I thought, 16 years of age, you're working with Donna Karan. Can anybody in the chat box say to me who Donna Karan is, please? Can you put in the chat box who Donna Karan is? Thank you, DKNY. And so she was a massive fashion designer, 16 years of age, and this girl's working with a big fashion designer. So afterwards, I wasn't able to hear her talk. So I said, tell me, what do you do? So she said, well, I have a t-shirt range and a sweatshirt range. A t-shirt range and a sweatshirt range, and you're working with Donna Karan. Tell me a bit more. So she said, well, I travel around the world with my dad, and I'm able to, and I basically sell my t-shirts and sweatshirts. And every time I sell a t-shirt, sweatshirt, I give a school uniform to a developing country. And I said, how many of those have you given? And she said, 640,000. 16 years of age. So what I wanted to say was that this next generation is building their business on purpose. And so what they're able to do is look at their business, and they're no longer thinking about, should I put purpose in my business? They're designing their whole business around purpose. And so when you look at that and you recognize that, what I wanted to say to you is, how many of you have thought about designing either your business brand or your personal brand around the purpose, and then driving the whole of the business model into the purpose? And so on this page, this is an exercise that we do in our business school. And this exercise allows us and allows me to show you how to future map. So what we do is we look at what industry you're in, and then we look at how do we future map an industry? How do we future map a topic? How do we future map an issue? And we're able to see where the gaps are in the market and where the trends are coming, so that you can move yourself into a new space. And I used to use this exercise with many of my businesses when I was moving them into new gaps and new spaces, to be able to get them to have a new space for their own business. And so I mapped this around fame. And what I talked to people about in 1996 to 2006, the world was offline and we were in a space of celebrity. And in that space, we used to have an area called print fame. And what that meant was that, and you heard me say on the other slide, people couldn't see into the lives of people. And so the only way that you could see people was through print. And mainly it was celebrities that were being visualized in this space. And at the time, the trend came out, and I wonder, do people remember Big Brother, and when Big Brother hit the market? And so at that time, Big Brother came out, and it was the first time that you could see into the lives of some people that weren't just celebrities. And then you heard me say, obviously digital changed the landscape. And then what happened was you had a new trend come out called YouTube fame. And at that point, all of your fame went online, and people, bloggers and vloggers, came out of nowhere. And a lady called Zuella, can anybody tell me who Zuella is in the chat box? A lady called Zuella came out, and she got a contract at 16, thank you, with L'Oreal. Thank you. So yeah, the quickest one off the mark was Marwa, and she said makeup blogger, absolutely right. And she was known, oh look, somebody's just said, oh my gosh, my daughter was mad on Zuella. And so Zuella came out 16 years of age, and she was a vlogger. And before you knew it, she had a contract with L'Oreal for over £2 million, 16 years of age. So this trend hit the market. And then what happened was TED Talks came along, and TED Talks put the business owner on stage. And for the first time ever, the business owner was the new celebrity. And we talked about this being Google fame, because then what happened was everybody started Googling everybody. And it was interesting. I was flying around the world. Obviously, that doesn't happen anymore. And I was speaking on stage, and I started to ask people, who Googles people? And every single hand in the room used to go up. And I was asking this all around the world. So if I spoke in China or Korea or America or the UK or wherever I was in the world, I asked this same question: who Googles people? And can you believe it? Nearly every hand in every single auditorium went up. And then I started saying to people, who thinks that? So let me ask you now, who thinks they're being Googled? And I would say a third of the hands in the room went up. And I started to smile and say to people, oh my gosh. So everybody's Googling everybody, but nobody realizes that they're being Googled. And so what I started to talk about and what I started to research over the years, we started to track what was the first 3 things that somebody was doing when they were trying to find you as a business. And what we recognized over the 7 years of doing this was the first thing they were doing was Googling you. The second thing they was doing was looking at your social media. And the third thing they were doing was looking at your website. Now, if the first thing they're doing is they're Googling you, and the second thing they're doing is looking at your social media, and the third thing they're doing is looking at your website, why is everybody spending all their marketing budget on the business brand alone and not transitioning their spend over to the people brands? And what I started to teach people is the power of Google fame, and that turning your profile into an asset was not a social media exercise. Turning your profile into an asset was what I described as Google fame, omni-channel. And that means, and you might want to write this down because this is a key point for the whole presentation, omni-channel is everywhere and anywhere, on and offline. Omni-channel is everywhere and anywhere, on and offline. And building your profile is not a social media exercise. Building your profile is what I term as Google fame. Okay, I'm going to do a poll with you, and I'm going to poll the first 2 things on this poll. So we're going to pull the poll up, and what I'm going to now ask you is, who has thought about, so if you can bring the poll up, that would be great, if we can do that. Thank you. So who has thought about their profile being an asset for their business? So you've heard me talk about turning your profile into an asset and how you could leverage your profile, and your profile could actually be an asset of the business. Who has thought about turning their profile into an asset? Yes, no, maybe. So if you can click that, that would be great. Could you put yes, no, or maybe? Yes, no, or maybe. And then the second one that I'd like to ask you is, who has Googled themselves? Who has Googled themselves? Yes or no? So who has Googled themselves? Yes or no? And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat box, because do you mean Googling the business and their social media first, or the actual business owner? Brilliant question. Is it Helen and Dan? Brilliant question. I mean you. Who? So I mean Googling you, not the business. Who has Googled themselves? You, the person. And who has looked at the images of themselves? Who has looked at what shows up? And the second good question, I am keen to know that too. What if you're Googling yourself right now? Brilliant, Bethan, because you're jumping the gun of the presentation. Okay, have we got that poll done? Because I can't see the results. So if that poll's now done, could we bring up the results, please? That would be brilliant. Thank you. Whoa. Okay. So who has thought about their profile being an asset of the business? Yes. 75% of people have thought about themselves as an asset. No, 11% and 14% maybe. That is a huge response. Thank you so much. And the second thing is, who has Googled themselves? 92% of people has Googled themselves. Brilliant. And 8% have not. Okay, so before I move on, oh wow, people have answered the other questions as well, but we will do some of those again. So what people have also answered is, what shows up when you Google yourself? Nothing, I don't show up. A confusion, me and others, or me, which is great. 52% said me, 40% said a confusion, and 8% said nothing. I'll come to the end in a minute. Okay, so if you can pull off the poll now, that would be great. And I'm going to come on to the Googling side now, and I'm going to answer the question for you as to, can you explain Google Fame more? So this is the next chapter of the presentation. So what I've just done is talk to you in the first section of the presentation around you are already a brand, and why you even need to think about being a brand, and what the trends are in the marketplace. Now I'm going to move into what is a brand and what is Google Fame. And then I'm going to talk about how to do Google Fame and what that means for you. But before we do that, what I will talk to you about is, and in the chat box, you could drive this into the chat box. So I'm just going to bring my chat box back up again. So before I move into what is Google Fame, I'm now going to talk to you about, you just heard me say, so Google Fame is omni-channel, everywhere and anywhere, on and offline. And what I teach people is, when you turn your profile into an asset, there are 3 key driving things that happen for you that are really integral to building out your profile. The first one is you drive more clients. That means that when you build your profile, you will drive more clients into your business. The person with the profile attracts the clients to them. And I'll talk to you about that in a moment. The second one is more money. You're able to put your prices up when you have a profile, because now people believe that you are a guru, an expert, an authority, you have an opinion in your area, in your industry, with your societal issue, or inside your business. And this applies to business owners and employer brands. And I will talk about both, because I want people to recognize this is not just around the CEO and the C-suite. This is about every single person that sits inside the organization. And I talk about it as brand power and the power that sits inside of the organization to leverage off. And the third area I talk about is attracting influencers. When you have a profile, you will attract more influence into your business. That means more influencers. So what happens when you have a profile is other influencers like to be associated with other influencers. So if you have a big brand and a big profile, you will attract other people, very big profiles around you, that will want to do talks with you, that will want to speak with you on social media, and that will want to connect with you and do partnerships with you. There are 2 types of profiles, one that is pushing onto the market and one that is pulling onto the market. And when you pull onto the market, that profile attracts the market to you. And that profile gets up in the morning, and inside their inbox, they have lots of people saying, would you work with me? They have a journalist saying, I've just Googled you. Could I write an article on you? They have somebody saying, wow, I've seen that you're an expert in your profession. Would you come and do a talk for me with NatWest Bank with 300 businesses? Just winking at that one. And then you have people coming in and saying, I'd like to work with you. And you're able to fill rooms and have waiting lists around you because you have a profile that people want to learn off. And this comes from a profile within 3 seconds of people Googling you and seeing what shows up. So if I move on to the next slide. Thank you. I'm now going to play this video, and this video comes from our online program, which is all around turn your profile into an asset. And it talks about what is a personal brand. And what it specifically says, and it's only 2 minutes, what it talks about is when you turn your profile into an asset, there is 2 types of profiles. One is a social profile and one is an anti-social profile. And a social profile is somebody that is on social media all the time, that is creating lots of content, that is using social. And I love that. I have a social profile. I absolutely have built my profile that way. My business partner, Darren Sherlaw, is an anti-social person. He does not like to use social media. He never uses Twitter. He has got a LinkedIn because I've kind of made sure that he has a LinkedIn, and he doesn't use social media at all. And what this video shows you is the power of Google fame. Equally, each one of us has a huge profile in the market, gets asked to speak at talks, has a full inbox with clients. And when you Google each one of us, you will see our profiles, and they look very similar on images. So if you watch this video, then we will come back to talking about explaining Google fame in more detail.
With the point that we are a brand, and so how do you want to show up? In this video, we're going to discuss what is a brand and how is that going to be designed for you. If you look back in history, there were 3 types of brands: print fame, social fame, and Google fame. And I left you with the exercise in the last video to go and Google myself, Linzi Boyd, go and Google my business partner, Darren Sherlaw, and go and Google yourself and some people around you. So in this video, I want to have a discussion around the findings that you had and talk about the images of how you search online. I discussed with you about my profile and how my profile was very social, and I'd used social media. I also speak around the world. I do press. I have a book out, and I believe that I build a lot around my profile. I discussed with you about my business partner, Darren Sherlaw, who is antisocial. He never uses social media. And for him, he will speak on stage. He will do engagements where he will speak to different audiences with clients, but he is not a social person at all. I asked you to go and look at both profiles. What did you come back with? My thought process is you would have seen that both profiles look very similar on Google. Both profiles have a huge presence and are engaging in lots of different areas. The point that I'm trying to make for you is personal brand, social versus Google. People think that your profile has to be a social media campaign to build your personal brand. And the reality is, from looking at Darren Sherlaw, you will realize that you do not need to be on social to have a personal brand profile. So through this 10-week program, what we are going to teach you is how to build your profile on Google and be Google famous without necessarily having to have a social profile or be social. When you look at both profiles in this exercise, I now want you to click on the image wall, and I want you to look at every single picture that sits on the image wall and write down on a piece of paper, where is the image coming from? And what you will see is that profiles pull from different places. And when you're on Google, you will find that Google pulls online and offline, anywhere and everywhere. What that means is that Darren Sherlaw, who never uses social media, can be on stage and can appear on Google without ever taking a photo and posting it himself. I can be on stage and be very active on social media, and those images can also go on Google. Personal brand is not a social media exercise. Personal brand is your whole profile.
Okay, thank you. So what I hope you got from that, and why I showed you that video, was to be able to understand looking at your Google profile. And If you Google myself, and I showed you that online, Linzi Boyd, and you click on images, you will be able to see all the image wall that pulls up for you. Why I talk about the image wall is because the image wall drives into the written word that lives on the Google pages. So the more images that you can get up on the image wall, the more written you have on your pages, to the point where you own every single page of Google. Why I showed you that with myself and Darren Sherlaw was that Darren doesn't use any social media. And if you Google Darren Sherlaw, you will see that he has many, many images on Google without ever using social media. I have a social profile. Darren has an anti-social profile. And this Google Fame-ometer, and I won't go through it in detail, but on the program, what we do is we discuss with people, these are the 10 layers within which you would build your Google Fame from. And when you look at your Google Fame, you're able to look at it and think about media, endorsement. Do you have a guru product? Is there a book out there? Do you have any videos? Have you won an award? Are there any networks that you've partnered with? Is there any articles that you've written? Are there any videos that you've created? Have you done any speaking engagements? And the last line that we talk about is social media. And when you look at that space, what you're looking at and seeing here is that Google pulls from everywhere. So if I'm online with you today and somebody has a big profile that's watching this talk and they post something, that image could potentially present itself on my Google wall. So I'm going to do something with you now. We're now live tweeting. And for the rest of the talk, we are going to live tweet on my Linzi Boyd account, Linzi_Boyd. And if we do that and you post on and do a post on my Twitter, let's see how, if we can get the pictures going onto your Google Fame to see if it will impact anything on your Google Fame. So if you tweet me, we will tweet you back, and we're going to now live tweet on the rest of this talk, Linzi_Boyd. So get your Twitter out if you've got a Twitter and start tweeting. And remember, post images. And if you can hashtag in, I am a brand, we can then track it. And we can also do a load of social media around this afterwards. So I'm now going to ask you to Google yourself. Can you all get your telephone out? Every one of you has a phone, and yes, somebody mentioned it in the chat box. I now want you to Google yourself, and 90-something% of you have said that you already have Googled yourself. So can you Google yourself? And then I want you to see, and you only have 3 seconds, because anyone, and you know, all our brains have now got an attention span that spans the same as a gnat. So 3 seconds is the longest that we get. I want you to Google yourself, go to the image wall. And in the image wall, I want you to see there's a question, which was the question on the poll. Does nothing show up for you? Is it confusing? Or within 3 seconds, is it great? So is there nothing showing up for you? Is it confusing, or is it great? And if the poll, we could re-poll that, that would be great. And if not, just drop it in the chat box. And if it's confusing, what I'd like you to tell me is, who are you showing up as? So I get a lot of people when I've spoken on stage, and I had a lady, 47 million in revenue, and she shouts out in the room, oh my gosh, I'm a murderer on death row. And the whole audience cracks up laughing. And then I have another guy who's from a business, 22 million in revenue, shouts out, I'm a cartoon character. And interestingly, I did another talk later on in the year and I talked about him, and his wife was in the audience and she said, that's my husband. He was the cartoon character. So what I always love to do, and if we were in real life, I would have been passing the microphone round to you right now. And the only way of doing this is by doing it in the chat box. Tell me who you're showing up as. Are you showing up as no one? Are you showing up as someone? Or are you showing up as great? So if we just take a second. Oh, Chelsea Davy, who used to go out with Prince Harry, always shows up on the, oh, so we have royalty on the call today. Somebody is a special advisor to the Home Secretary. Fantastic. Somebody, we have a footballer here, and we have somebody's put the name in and the business name into Google as my name is quite generic. So these are key questions that come up. And what we teach people is how to turn your profile into an asset, how to build your profile so that you show up on Google, and how you are going to build your profile on purpose so that you are driving your profile into a purpose conversation and you're not leading with the sales and the products of your business. So if I re-poll, and I'm just going to re-poll very quickly, could you now answer, now you've done the exercise with me, what has shown up? Nothing, confusing, or great, which is me. Nothing, confusing, or great. Nothing, confusing, or great. And then if we can show that poll again, that would be fantastic. And I just want to see, now we've re-polled, if anything has changed in the conversation. So if I can get the results up, that's great. Right, 9, oh, hang on, sorry, hang on, nothing. Ah, so it's changed. So now I've got nothing, I don't show up at all. 52% is confusing and 36% is me. So that's a great statistic to understand. So what you're looking to do, and congratulations to the me's, what you're looking to do is to really build on that. So if you're showing up as you, are you showing up on purpose? Are you showing up as what you want to be known for? And or are you showing up as something that's more around the product or the benefits of the product? And so what I then ask people, and Will, if you can pull the poll down again now for me, please. What I then ask people is, and this is a very, very important question. So are you all ready with your buttons? This is a very important question. Who wants to be famous? Who wants to be famous? Now, when I do this on stage and I teach for the London Stock Exchange and I teach for the London Mayor's office and I teach them how to build a business, build a brand. And when I do this in the London Stock Exchange, Amira tends to kind of twitch a bit, and I'm in the London Stock Exchange and she says, what do you mean, Linzi? Stop asking that question in this room. And then I quickly say to them, okay, quickly, who wants to be known in their industry for making a difference? Who wants to be known inside their industry for making a difference? So now, who wants to be known in their industry for making a difference? And what tends to happen, and Amira takes a sigh of relief because I've moved on from fame. And then I say, who wants to be known outside of their industry for making a difference? Who wants to be known outside of their industry for making a difference? And I would say at this point, probably 3/4 of the room hands go up. And then I say, who wants to be known in the world for making a difference? Who wants to be known in the world for making a difference? And I would say still 1/2 or 1/3 of the hands still go up when they want to be known in the world. So I'm going to poll this, and this is fantastic. The chat box is just lighting up. I absolutely love this. Can I acknowledge you for participating in the chat box? It's wonderful. And so when you, and somebody said you can't find me on Twitter, so could you just put my Twitter handle into the chat box? That would be great. It's Linzi, Linzi _Boyd. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is poll you. And I'd like to know who wants to be known in their industry, who wants to be known outside of their industry, and who wants to be known in the world for making a difference. And if you could bring the poll up, that would be great. Who wants to be known in the industry? Who wants to be known outside of the industry? And who wants to be known in the world? Okay, if we can poll that, that would be great. So inside the industry, outside of the industry, and inside the world. And this is all around purpose. So if we can get the results for that, that would be great. And whilst we're doing that, Karen has said, I would love to make a difference. I see a successful business is enabling me to do that. And then before I wrap up this talk, when we come to the end, I'd love it if everybody would say who is an early stage growth business, who's an established business, and who is a startup business. And that would be great to put in the chat box for me. So when we do the questions, I know who's on the talk. Okay, so now we've got the poll. So now I can see who, the last one. Great. So we've got 9. Oh my gosh. Wow. This is fantastic, guys. We've got 19% said inside their industry. 13% have said outside their industry, and drum roll, we have 68% said in the world. 68%. Well, let me tell you, you're in the right place, because people tend to come to my talk if, as my CEO would describe, Catherine Plunkett, who I know is on the call today, she would say people are agitating for change. And so people that tend to come around Bob are agitating for change. And what we say to people is fame is just a state of mind. And when people can get their head around the fact that if you are known inside your industry, there is some form of fame. If you're known outside of your industry, there's some form of fame. If you are known in the world, you will definitely be known. If you are known in the world, people will be stopping you in an airport. So let me go back to my initial question. What do you want to be known for? And how do you want to leave people feeling? And the key driver of a personal brand and building out your profile and turning your profile into an asset is then, how do you build your profile on purpose, to be purposeful and to align it with everything that you do? And so if you can bring up my last slide, which is the ladder system, before I go into the video, and then we're going to go into some Q&A. That would be great. Thank you. If you go into the ladder, that's fantastic. So in the ladder system, and this is an exercise that we teach, and this is one of the key exercises I'm going to show you. We talk to people about moving their profile from push to pull. And what we talked about earlier on in this conversation around Google Fame was there are 2 types of profiles. And one is pushing onto the market, and the other one is pulling onto the market. And when you have these 2 types of profiles, what you're able to do is to pull the market into you, or in a push space, you're still selling onto the market. And what we say to people is that people tend to be in 2 areas with their profile. And when you have a push profile, this profile tends to be out in the market selling the benefits and the products of the business. And that means you'll see this on LinkedIn. How many of you get people every single day on their LinkedIn profile saying, hi, my name is such and such, and I'm here to sell you a widget. Would you like to join my, would you like to get more SEO in your business? I can help you do that. And the first thing that I do when I get one of those is I press block on my LinkedIn. And what then happens is within 2 seconds, if not 1 second, you have completely cut me off as a prospect of somebody that you can have a conversation with. And that is leading your profile as a push profile, leading with the products of your business. So what you're selling and the benefits of your business. What's the benefit around the product? And you'll see that so many times in the market. And what we call that is personal brand suicide. Because what you're now doing is absolutely eliminating your profile from having any traction in the market. The other side is the top layer of this ladder system, and it's called the up system. So how you go up and how you unite on purpose, up, to be able to go up the ladder. And this is all about aligning your profile on purpose. And there are 4 key drivers that take you up the ladder system. And I will start from the top and I will work down. Now, please, everybody, get a pen and a piece of paper and write this down, because these are 4 key lines to write down. So the first one is who, and this is the emotional connection with the customer. And what I would be saying to you is, who are you and who are you connecting with? And what's the emotions that sit around that person? So you heard me say at the beginning, I'm all about, I've got it on my wall. If you can read that, it's in the distance. I need some glasses. The face of modern business and the face of the modern world. And specifically, I'm around the face so that everyone can be seen and heard, no matter where they live or the demographic that they live in. Can you articulate who? What's your emotional connection? Who are you talking to? Not from a sales perspective, but from an emotional perspective. The second layer is the purpose, which is then all around, why are you here? And what we say to people is, remember who you are. Why are you on this planet? And what are you here to do in the world? And so why are you here? You heard me say at 13 years of age, I stood in the kitchen with my mum and I said to her, I want to leave school. And I did at 15 years of age with no qualifications. And I knew in my heart of heart that I'd seen something in Oprah Winfrey. And I drove my whole personal brand off that. And it was all around shifting the world into a new era through the eyes of brands. I'm here to shift the world into a new era, but through the eyes of brands, through the eyes of these people, so that the businesses and the brands are here to make the shift. And the third layer is what we describe as the asset layer. What is your uniqueness? What's your asset? What's going to drive this? And the purpose is the thing that will get you out of bed in the morning when everything else is failing and nothing is going right in your business. And the asset is what will increase the value. And in the asset layer, it's what are you here to do? What is it that's your uniqueness that you're here to do? Look, my uniqueness is I'm good at designing IP. I'm good at designing methodologies. That's my skill set. And so my business partner and I got together who had the same skill set, and we put 2 sides of the coin together, and we were able to create curriculums for businesses to drive, yes, growth, sales, awareness, and valuation up, but actually to help them to lead with purpose. And so my asset layer is this 2 sides of the coin and being able to drive that into my purpose. And then the bridge is what you take your customer journey on. So there's 3 words. Think of this as your values. What's your personal brand values? I'm here to connect people around the world to unite so they can learn together to grow and they can trade with each other to impact change. My values are building communities around connecting, learning, and trading. Have you thought about what yours are? And this is how you drive your profile into a ladder system so that you're able to drive the profile up of your business and you're able to align your profile so that the market comes to you and you're able to build the purpose around that. So before we go into Q&A, I'm going to leave you with one video, and it's 2 minutes long. And I'm going to invite you all to join our quiet revolution. And what we're here to do, if my purpose is around building brands to shift industries to make a positive change in the world, then I invite you to join us, to join our quiet revolution, and then we'll go into question time.
Everything is so beautiful and lovely and alive. You shouldn't say anything about anything not being.
What if you could do something different with your lives that makes a positive impact on your family, your friends, industry, even the world? The 21st century is about shifting industries towards balance between nature and technology, and how these two come together to create harmony. People have always thrived in communities, living, working, and trading together. But today, living online has become the norm. Platforms of gossip, losing sight of who we are, what we are, eager to be liked. Yet for what? What if you could join a quiet revolution, connecting people, business owners, and world leaders together from first world and developing countries to impact industries and shift the world? Imagine your business as a house with like-minded people living together, connected from the global communities to the city streets, all united through passion and purpose. A brand new earth where we're building impact in every single business to be able to make a positive change in the world. Education will help children in the way that they need to learn and not in the way that society dictates. Businesses integrated into society, giving back into their communities and the world at large. Sustainability is a given and not an option. Purpose is the new trading currency, enabling business leaders to become world leaders. We are now all a brand after all. Do you want to be known in your industry, outside your industry, or even the world for making a difference? Build your brand, grow your business, impact an industry, shift the world. Bob Earth, a purpose-led platform connecting enterprise to trade.
Thank you all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was, as ever, completely inspirational. I'm sure again, chat box has been amazing. Your use of the chat box, phenomenal, I have to say, absolutely phenomenal. So I do want to get some questions in. So please do pop them into the Q&A. I'm looking at them already. But I thought there was one that really struck me as being relevant, and particularly to a lot of people, would be how does this work if you're thinking of exiting your business, and I was coming here, and you've built up this profile,
and I thought, what a brilliant question!
What a brilliant question! Absolutely, it's so great. So yeah, just if you're looking to exit your business and you build up this fantastic profile, it goes with you, right? So how do you manage that business brand and your personal profile?
But this is one of I get this question in every single school. And it's one of the ones that obviously when I build people's business DNAs as well as the personal DNA, and I align the two. And one of the most common questions is, okay, but then how do you exit your business? So there's two key criteria when we're building out a business for exit. The first one is when you want to exit, and that's really key for me. So when we do your business DNA, we look at when the exit point is for you, and we go, is it in 1 year, is it 2 years, is it 5 years, or are you successioning out of the business and handing it down? So that's one of the key criteria. When I understand the timeline for somebody, then I'm able to build the profile accordingly. So if you say to me anything 3 years and below, my belief is that anybody that's saying they want to exit in 3 years, you can cut down a year because you're already thinking about exit. And so you're already in the exit mindset. So what I tend to say to people is spend 12 months getting your business ready. In regard of, if you're the CEO, then what I would be saying to you is spend 12 months having your internal business ready so you could move yourself into a founder role. And the reason for that is when you exit the business, your profile is going to be designed in a way that it will look so good as a founder, because you will be pulling in the market and attracting the market that you're not operationally tied to that business. So it's not intrinsic for you to be running the business, and your profile is now seen as a huge asset for the business, number one. And secondly, when you exit the business, you would be then still in a founder role or a chairman role, whichever one's decided on, and your profile would be the asset piece that they would be buying into rather the operational piece. That's one vision side. The second thing that I say to people then is how to build that profile out. And the key criteria is, what's your purpose that aligns with the business brand? And that's one of the most important things, because if I designed your profile around the business purpose alone, then what happens is when you sell, your profile goes with you for life. You're not selling the profile, you're selling the business. And so you need to understand what it looks like for you past exit, what's next. And so if you can understand past exit and what's next, you would design your profile on purpose and pull the market for the business, but also be designing your profile. So as you grow and scale and the business eventually, you will eventually exit out of the business, you've still got your profile intact, and that's built out into the marketplace accordingly.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Absolutely. Great. Kristen, have you got any other questions on the chat?
Yeah, a really good one's come in, and I think it will be quite applicable to a lot of the entrepreneurs on the call who maybe have a day job and also have a business on the side. So the question is, how do you manage your personal profile if your day job, so to speak, and your business are in two different sectors?
And is this an employer brand, or is this somebody running the business?
I think it's someone running the business, yeah.
Okay. So what I say to people is, so if you are a business owner and you're doing one thing and your business is doing another, you're still in the product layer. So I'm moving you, and people come to me all the time and they say, my business is an app and I sell my app through this channel. And I'm saying, no, your business is not an app. Your product is an app. What's your business? What's your brand? What are you in the business of? And so what I tend to say to people is, what are you in the business of? Because at the moment, I could have 20 different product lines in all different industry sectors. But when I build up to the brand layer, the DNA of what are you in the business of, now I'm in the asset layer. And when you're in the asset layer, you're able to understand the true value that's sat there, and you can go across industries, across products and across sectors, because you're going out with one message, one purpose, one asset that sits at the top. And that's how I design the business model around. And so it doesn't matter for me if you're in 10 industries with 10 different product lines, the brand that sits above it is the connector that connects it all together.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Lindsay. That's great.
Lindsay, has things changed over COVID? Has it become more important?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question, Jill. Thank you. Do you know what's happened during COVID is the trends sped up enormously. And so during COVID, we've had about 5,500 businesses since 2016 come through our programs. And we had about 2,000 of them come around us in the first 10 weeks of the first lockdown, which was incredible. It was I mean, you can imagine it was
yeah.
crazy. And the main thing, there was a lot of fear in the market, particularly in the shock phase. So whether businesses were dropping, which we had a lot of businesses dropping 90, 100% in revenue, or whether they were frozen, so they weren't going up or going down, or we had other businesses that were actually doing incredibly well, but they couldn't keep up with the demand. They didn't have the infrastructure sat behind them. We started teaching them literally week by week, telling them what to do next. And the main changeover point, Jill, was to lead with a human response and to put your arms around the community. So in the first 3 months, we said to people, stop selling. Now, can you imagine going out to people that are desperate for revenue and turning around to them and going, would you stop selling? And the reason for that was when people are in shock, think about it as grief. You cannot hear anything. The last thing you want is somebody to come to you and start selling something to you. So we said the best thing you can do is lead with a human response. And this was where we had a lot of attention around the people brands of the organization. And we had one client come in, an estate agency business with 500 employees, and they brought 96 of their employees in. And we started teaching them, because this was their sales team on the ground with everything closed. So we started teaching them how to lead with a human response over 8 weeks rather than the business response. And they pulled so much of the market, because imagine you're no longer leading with one voice, which is the CEO or the C-suite. You're leading with 96 voices, all aligned with purpose. And they're all aligned with their own purpose. So you've got 96 channels to market, with each one having their own demographic. So somebody might be getting the younger generation, somebody's getting the older generation, and each one is pulling the market in through their voice. Now that's going straight back into the business. And this is where we say lead with the culture externally and bring the brand in internally. Because when you have that alignment, now the people brands are the channel, the pull, and the human response is the who, the emotional connection. And now people are going, I want to be part of your community. And this particular estate agency business ran 5 webinars with us and brought them into a Facebook group. They had over 700 people each webinar on their program, on their webinar, and they didn't speak once about houses. They spoke about the market, they spoke about trends, and that's very different for a very traditional industry to do something like that. They spoke about the community. So the human response was the main thing, and leading with the people was a huge changeover point for organizations, and people saw massive growth in their business because of it. And when people were able to sell again, they built this huge loyalty in the community. So now all the clients were there and they loved them, and they were doing social listening and listening to the clients what the market need was. And then they could say, now let me respond to you and help you with your journey. And here's something that might help you on the journey.
Makes so much sense. Thank you. Kristen, have you got another question? Probably a final question, I hate to say, because we're just running slightly out of time. But yeah, Kristen.
Yeah, sure. I think a really good one that's come in, a really interesting one around Googling yourself. And if you were to Google yourself and perhaps something negative or something that you don't want to be associated with your business or your personal brand, how can you get rid of that or push more positive content to the top?
This is another, I should have questions. I should do this on my website, actually. This is a brilliant question, and another one that I get asked in every school. Look, number one, there's damage limitation. And I used to work in this space quite a lot with profiles, because I worked a lot with celebrities that would go and blow themselves up in 24 hours in the market. And then you would have to rectify the whole of the profile. So it was called damage limitation. And what happens now, obviously, it's shown up on Google. So, people's profiles within, a short period of time can get blown up. But what you're doing is, if you understand your purpose first and foremost, and I know I keep driving this in, but when you drive it around a purpose, the first thing you're able to do is lead with that. So if you have bad press or something that shows up on your Google, then we teach you first and foremost, what do you want your profile to show up as? That's absolutely key, because that's going to drive the engagement. And then the second thing is the frequency around where you're putting your content. And remember the chart that I showed, and obviously I can't do it in detail because, you know, we only have an hour. But what I would say to you is, you're building it around multiple channels to market. So people think it has to just be social media. And the reality is it actually doesn't. You've seen that proven with Darren Sherlaw. When you access other channels and you post frequently, Google loves it. So Google's owned by YouTube. And I saw one of the questions in there saying, why doesn't it show up Facebook and Instagram? Because Google doesn't own Facebook and Instagram, it owns YouTube. So you need to use the channels that Google owns, and they love YouTube. So if you're good at doing video, use that. Get yourself a website and buy your domain name and start posting content on that. And that's another way of driving your profile. And what I would say to you then is 3 months to turn the engine on with Google. So and we teach you how many times and what you need to do, but in a nutshell, 3 months to turn the machine on, the Google machine. And if you use different touch points, so partnerships, a hero channel, press, media, all the different areas, video, different areas, and you build it around your profile, then you're able to switch the engine on. Once you've done it for 3 months, Google starts then liking you, and it will start pushing content off and pushing new content up. And then that way your profile starts looking like your profile that you want it to. And within 6 months, you should start seeing some really good results on your image wall.
That's great. Thanks, Lindsay. Really reassuring as well. If anything negative was to come up, you can turn that around. That's
great. Yeah, damage limitation.
Fabulous. Great. Thank you so much. Lucy, can we fire up those slides just again, just as I say, thank you so much to Lindsay. What a session. I can see from the chat box, it's just gone down fabulously, as I knew it would. I absolutely knew it would. Just a reminder, sorry.
Jill, could we invite people onto the Bob Earth Facebook community, because there were so many questions in this chat box that I never got down to answering, and I always get off and feel bad that I haven't managed to answer them. So anyone that wants to come on to Bob Earth Facebook group, and I'm happy to run a Q&A live for 20 minutes or half an hour and answer any of your questions that you've got, and any other more. I'm happy to do a live on the Facebook group, and we'll keep the conversation running.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that. So that I cover off what I need to do, just to bring your attention to the Hiscox personal indemnity offer, and we can move to the next slide. That's great, just so everybody knows about that. And Bob free taster sessions as well. Here we've got this is the URL, just the link to the Bob free Bob taster sessions. I can imagine that will be heavily redeemed given what the input we've had this afternoon. So that's fantastic. And then I have another couple of a quick ask of you. The feedback has been fantastic, and I got to ask you to just give us your feedback on this session. It's really important to us, and it'll take you 2 seconds, I swear. It literally, you just take your camera to the QR code, and it will take you, it's a 2-question survey. Let me just run through the NPS for you very quickly. If you give us a 1 to 6, if you would actively tell people not to attend, that's 1 to 6. 7 to 8, you wouldn't recommend. 9 to 10, that's 9 to 10. If you would recommend this to a friend, and given the chat box, I think an awful lot of you would, please score us 9 to 10. We genuinely don't mind what the score is, but do give us the feedback. Any sort of verbatim feedback is just gold to us, because we're always looking to improve as we go along. So I'd be hugely grateful if you've got value from today. Please do just take a second to do that QR code. And while you're doing that, just remind you that we have the session at 2:30 as well. You've almost got time for a cup of tea. We've definitely got time for a cup of tea before you go into another session at 2:30, and we'll put that up in just a second. And that would be session 3. So this is session 2, folks. If you're on the QR, I just saw that come up. This is session 2. And this is the third session that's has the link up right now. We've got so many sessions. We've got a link up for that one at I think that's actually 2:30. Apologies, I think that's 2:30. We'll double check that. One of my team can just double check that starts at 2:30. And the funding spotlight, if you're in the investment trail and you are looking at a term sheet, and the term sheet language is something you'd like to get to grips with, this is a fantastic session, part of our funding spotlight, deciphering the terms, and that's from on the 25th of February, and that's from 11 to 12, a quick session on that, really helpful. The session is 2:30, folks. Thank you so much, whoever's gone out and done that. It's 2:30, that was my mistake. So you do have a time for that cup of tea before you go ahead and watch the next session. Remember, that's on narratives. But I just want to finish up, we're slightly over time, but thank you so much. Thank you to Linzi, you're absolutely fabulous. I just knew you would be. And just thank you to the interaction has been fabulous, really great. And I know that you were getting lots out of that. I could see the conversation. We'll look at what we can do with saving the chat. I'm not sure about that. There was a question about that. I'll have a look at that in terms of GDPR and all the other great things I have to think about. But I'll make sure that you get a link sent out with the free taster session and other information on that. So thank you so much for joining us today. But you're free to go and get that cup of tea now. We're just seeing people drop off now. That's great. That's great. Fantastic. What a great session.
Oh, that was awesome. I loved that. So
You were phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.